What if I told you that the Buddha discovered something profound about human nature that modern psychology is only now beginning to understand? That there comes a moment in our lives, often around the age of 50, when we stand at a crossroads between two paths, one leading to gradual decline and regret, the other to profound liberation and joy. Today, I want to share with you 4 Buddhist truths that can completely transform your life experience after 50. These aren't just philosophical concepts, they are practical keys to unlocking a level of peace and fulfillment that many people never even imagined possible. But before we begin this journey together, I need you to understand something crucial. Letting go doesn't mean losing something precious. In Buddhist wisdom, letting go is like opening your fist to release a handful of sand. Only then can you receive something far more valuable. So settle in, take a deep breath, and prepare to discover why your 50s might just be the beginning of the most extraordinary chapter of your life. Part 1: The Wisdom of the Eternal Student, Why Learning Never Ends. Let me tell you about one of the Buddha's closest disciples, Ananda. For 25 years, Ananda served as the Buddha's personal attendant, hearing every teaching, witnessing every miracle, present at every profound moment. Yet when the Buddha passed away, Ananda had not yet achieved enlightenment. Picture the scene: the first council of monks was convening to preserve the Buddha's teachings. Only enlightened monks could participate. Ananda, despite his vast knowledge, was excluded. He was devastated. At 60 years old, he felt like a failure. Too old, he thought. Too late. But that night, something beautiful happened. As Ananda prepared for bed, exhausted by grief and self-doubt, he finally let go of his desperate striving. In that moment of surrender, not giving up, but releasing his tight grip on expectations, enlightenment dawned. The next morning, he joined the council not as a student, but as a master. Now, let me tell you about Sarah, a 52-year-old accountant from Ohio. After her divorce, Sarah found herself saying the same words Ananda might have felt: "It's too late for me to change." For months, Sarah had been watching her 20-something colleagues effortlessly navigate new software, speak confidently in meetings, and seem to absorb information like sponges. Meanwhile, she struggled with technology, felt invisible in discussions, and convinced herself that learning was a game for young people. The turning point came during a particularly frustrating day when Sarah's computer crashed, and she lost hours of work. Instead of her usual response, calling IT and feeling helpless, something shifted. She remembered her grandmother's words: "Honey, the day you stop learning is the day you start dying." That evening, Sarah enrolled in an online computer course. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. 6 months later, she was teaching digital literacy to other mature workers. A year later, she started her own consulting business. But here's what's truly beautiful about Sarah's story: the transformation wasn't just professional. As she embraced learning again, she noticed her mind becoming more flexible, more curious, more alive. She started taking pottery classes, learned Spanish, and even tried salsa dancing. At 54, Sarah often says she feels younger and more vibrant than she did at 30. The Buddha taught about something called Shoshin, beginner's mind. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. Think about this for a moment. When we convince ourselves we're too old to learn, we're actually committing a form of spiritual violence against ourselves. We're telling our consciousness, "This miraculous, ever-evolving awareness, that it's somehow broken or expired. The truth is, neuroplasticity research now proves what Buddhist masters have known for millennia. Our brains remain capable of forming new neural pathways throughout our entire lives. Every time you learn something new, you're literally rewiring your brain, creating fresh connections, opening new possibilities. As the Buddha said in the Dhammapada, if you do not change direction, you may end up where you are heading. After 50, this isn't a warning, it's an invitation. An invitation to choose curiosity over certainty, growth over stagnation, possibility over limitation. Part 2, The Sacred Art of Releasing, Creating Space for Peace. There's an ancient story from Buddhist tradition about a clever way to catch a monkey. Hunters would take a jar with a narrow neck, just wide enough for a monkey's hand to enter. They'd place something irresistible inside, a piece of fruit or some nuts. The monkey, seeing the treat, would reach into the jar and grasp it tightly. But here's the trap: with its fist closed around the prize, the monkey's hand was now too large to withdraw from the jar. The monkey could escape at any moment simply by letting go of what it held, but its attachment to that small reward kept it trapped. The hunters didn't need chains or cages. The monkey's own inability to release what it grasped became its prison. Michael, a 57-year-old teacher, lived this parable for years without realizing it. His jar was a friendship with his college roommate, David. For 30 years, Michael had maintained this relationship out of loyalty, nostalgia, and habit. But David had become increasingly bitter, critical, and draining. Every conversation left Michael feeling exhausted and negative. David complained constantly, criticized Michael's choices, and seemed to take pleasure in pointing out everything wrong with the world. Michael's wife gently suggested he might want to distance himself from David, but Michael felt trapped by history. "We've been friends for 3 decades, he'd say. I can't just abandon him." The awakening came during a particularly toxic phone call where David spent 45 minutes berating Michael for being too optimistic and naive about how cruel the world really is. After hanging up, Michael sat in his garden, feeling emotionally battered. That's when he remembered something his meditation teacher had said: compassion doesn't require you to be a doormat for someone else's suffering. The next time David called with his usual complaints, Michael tried something different. He listened with kindness but didn't absorb the negativity. When David began his familiar patterns of criticism, Michael gently said, "David, I care about you, but I'm going to limit our conversations to positive topics from now on." David was shocked, then angry. He accused Michael of being fake and abandoning a friend in need. But Michael held firm, his heart breaking but his spirit finally free. 6 months later, their friendship had naturally faded. But something beautiful had taken its place in Michael's life: space for deeper connections with people who shared his values of growth, positivity, and mutual support. The Buddha taught about upadana, clinging or attachment. But there's a profound misunderstanding in Western culture about what Buddhist detachment means. It doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. Healthy detachment means loving without losing yourself. It means caring without controlling. It means being present without being possessed by the outcomes. When we cling too tightly to relationships that drain us, possessions that burden us, or emotions that harm us, we become like that monkey with its fist stuck in the jar. We have the key to our freedom, but we're afraid to use it because it means releasing something we think we need. After 50, many of us carry decades of accumulated clutter, not just physical objects, but emotional baggage, toxic relationships, outdated beliefs about ourselves, and commitments that no longer serve our highest good. The Buddha said, "You only lose what you cling to." This isn't about becoming a hermit or cutting off everyone who occasionally annoys you. It's about making conscious choices about where you invest your precious life energy. If this message is resonating with you, I encourage you to subscribe to the Buddha Coha channel and ring that notification bell. We're building a community of seekers who understand that wisdom has no expiration date, and your journey matters to us. Part 3, Aging as Awakening, Rejecting Society's Fear-Based Narratives. Many people don't know this, but the figure we call the Laughing Buddha, Buddha, wasn't actually the historical Buddha. He was a Chinese monk who lived to be quite elderly, and interestingly, his most profound teachings came in his later years. Legend says that as Buddha aged, instead of becoming more serious or withdrawn, he became more joyful, more playful, more genuinely content. When people asked him about the secret to happiness in old age, he would simply laugh and say, "I stopped trying to be young." But here's the deeper wisdom. Buddha understood that society's fear of aging is really a fear of authenticity. When we're young, we spend so much energy trying to fit in, to please others, to build the right image. But age brings a beautiful gift, the freedom to simply be ourselves. Janet, a 59-year-old marketing executive, experienced this revolution firsthand. After 30 years in corporate America, she was suddenly restructured out of her job. The coded language was polite, but the message was clear. She was too old, too expensive, too set in her ways. At first, Janet was devastated. She spent months applying for similar positions, only to face subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, age discrimination. Younger, less experienced candidates were chosen over her repeatedly. She began to internalize society's message, "Past 50, you're past your prime." The transformation began when Janet was having coffee with her teenage granddaughter, Emma. Emma was stressed about college applications, worried about her appearance, and anxious about fitting in. "Grandma," Emma said, "I wish I could be confident like you." Janet was shocked. "Confident? Honey, I just lost my job. I feel like a failure." Emma looked at her with wise young eyes. "But Grandma, you don't care what anyone thinks anymore. You dress how you want, you say what you mean, you do what makes you happy. That's not failure, that's freedom." That conversation changed everything for Janet. Instead of trying to fit back into a system that devalued her, she started her own consulting firm, specializing in helping companies develop age-diverse workplaces. She stopped dyeing her hair, started wearing colors she loved instead of professional blacks and grays, and began speaking openly about ageism. 2 years later, Janet's business was thriving, but more importantly, she was thriving. She often tells people, "I spent 40 years trying to be the right age. Now I'm finally the right me." The Buddha's first noble truth is often translated as, "Life is suffering," but a more accurate translation might be, "Life is unsatisfactory," or "Life is constantly changing." This includes our bodies, our appearances, and our capabilities. But here's what's revolutionary about Buddhist philosophy. Instead of seeing change as something to fear or fight, we can see it as the very nature of existence. Every wrinkle tells a story. Every gray hair represents wisdom earned. Every limitation opens the door to new forms of strength. In our youth-obsessed culture, we're taught to view aging as a disease to be cured, a problem to be solved, a failure to be hidden. But what if aging is actually a graduation? What if the lines on our faces are diplomas from the University of Life experience? The Buddha taught that happiness comes not from getting what we want, but from wanting what we have. After 50, this wisdom becomes particularly powerful. We can spend our energy fighting the natural process of aging, or we can invest it in becoming more fully ourselves. Think about the most inspiring older people you know. They rarely look 20, but they glow with something far more beautiful than youth: authenticity, wisdom, the quiet confidence that comes from having survived storms and learned to dance in the rain. Part 4: The Liberation of Forgiveness. It's never too late for new beginnings. One of the most enduring stories in Buddhist literature tells of a man named Angulimala. Having made many people fear him for what he did, he carried a somber necklace that symbolized his past misdeeds. By the time he crossed paths with the Buddha, legend says his actions had caused much suffering, and he was on the verge of committing yet another wrong. When Angulimala saw the Buddha walking alone on the path, he thought he had found someone easy to confront. Yet as he hurried after the Buddha, something remarkable happened. No matter how fast he ran, he could not catch up with the calmly walking monk. Exhausted, he called out, "Stop, monk." The Buddha turned and replied gently, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." Puzzled, Angulimala said, "How can you say that? You are still walking." "I have stopped causing harm," the Buddha answered. "I have stopped creating suffering. But you have not. When will you stop?" In that moment, something shifted deep within Angulimala. A man long associated with serious misdeeds suddenly saw the possibility of a different path. He renounced his harmful ways and asked to become the Buddha's disciple. Many were upset. How could someone with such a dark past become a monk? How could a person who had caused so much pain deserve forgiveness? But the Buddha taught a crucial truth: no one is beyond redemption. It is never too late to change course. Angulimala later became a monk known for compassion and wisdom. His transformation remains a powerful teaching in Buddhism. If someone who once caused deep suffering can find peace and purpose, then each of us can overcome our past and choose kindness. Robert's story isn't as dramatic as Angulimala's, but it's equally powerful in its own way. At 53, Robert was consumed by regret. He had been an absent father during his children's crucial years, choosing career advancement over family time. He had been a workaholic husband, missing anniversaries, school plays, and quiet moments of connection. Now, facing an empty nest and a marriage hanging by a thread, Robert was drowning in the story he told himself: "I'm a failure as a father and husband. It's too late to fix the damage I've done. My children barely know me, and my wife deserves better." The wake-up call came when his 25-year-old daughter announced her engagement and didn't ask him to walk her down the aisle. "I want someone who was actually there for me," she explained, and those words shattered Robert's heart. But instead of sinking deeper into self-pity, Robert did something unexpected. He enrolled in a meditation retreat focused on forgiveness, not seeking forgiveness from others, but learning to forgive himself. During one particularly intense meditation session, Robert experienced what he later described as a moment of clarity. He realized that his guilt and regret were actually forms of self-centeredness. He was so focused on his own pain and shame that he wasn't truly seeing his family's needs in the present moment. That insight changed everything. Instead of wallowing in what he couldn't change, Robert began focusing on what he could do now. He started by writing heartfelt letters to each family member, not asking for forgiveness, but taking full responsibility for his choices and expressing his love. He began showing up differently. When his son mentioned struggling with his new business, Robert didn't just offer advice, he offered time, really listening to his son's concerns and fears. When his daughter was stressed about wedding planning, he learned about flowers and venues and color schemes, not because he understood them, but because she cared about them. Slowly, patiently, without demanding forgiveness or recognition, Robert rebuilt relationships he thought were permanently broken. The day his daughter called and asked, "Dad, would you like to walk me down the aisle?" Robert wept tears of gratitude. But the most beautiful part of Robert's transformation wasn't his family's forgiveness, it was his own self-forgiveness. He learned that redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about choosing to write a different future. The Buddha taught that we are all works in progress. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful concept called Buddha nature, the idea that within every being lies the seed of enlightenment, the potential for awakening, regardless of past actions or current circumstances. This doesn't mean we ignore the harm we may have caused or the mistakes we've made. True forgiveness requires honest acknowledgement of our actions and their consequences. But it also means understanding that we are not our worst moments. We are not forever defined by our greatest failures. After 50, many of us carry heavy backpacks filled with regret, shame, and the belief that we've missed our chance for meaningful change. But what if that belief itself is the only thing standing between us and transformation? The Buddha said, "Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is found written in your religious books. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it." So observe your life with fresh eyes. Analyze your regrets with compassion rather than condemnation. When you find that forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, agrees with reason and conduces to the good of everyone involved, accept it and live up to it. Now, let's pause for a moment and see how these four truths weave together into a tapestry of wisdom for life after 50. The willingness to remain a student keeps our minds fresh and our spirits young. The courage to release what no longer serves us creates space for what truly matters. The rejection of society's limiting narratives about aging allows us to write our own story of vitality and purpose. And the practice of forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, frees us from the prison of past mistakes. These aren't just nice ideas, they're practical tools for transformation. They're invitations to see your post-50 years not as a postscript to your real life, but as potentially the most authentic, fulfilling, and impactful chapters you'll ever write. I want to speak directly to you for a moment. If you're watching this and you're over 50 or approaching 50, you might be feeling like life has already been decided for you. Like your personality is set, your relationships are fixed, your limitations are permanent, and your past mistakes are unforgivable. But the Buddha's wisdom, validated by modern neuroscience and psychology, tells us a different story. Your brain remains plastic. Your heart remains capable of growth. Your spirit remains capable of renewal. Your story remains capable of surprising plot twists. The question isn't whether you're too old to change, The question is whether you're ready to stop believing you're too old to change. If these Buddhist truths are speaking to your heart, I want to invite you to take action. First, subscribe to Buddha Coha and join our community of seekers who understand that wisdom knows no age limit. Second, share this message with someone who needs to hear it, because the person struggling with these same beliefs might be someone you know and love. Let me leave you with 4 practical commitments you can make today, based on these Buddhist truths. First, embrace the student's mind. This week, learn something completely new. It doesn't have to be profound. Maybe it's a new word in another language, a cooking technique, or how to use a feature on your phone you've never tried. The content matters less than the act of learning itself. Second, practice conscious release. Identify one relationship, possession, belief, or habit that drains your energy without adding value to your life. This isn't about dramatic gestures, it's about mindful choices. Maybe it's unfollowing social media accounts that make you feel bad about yourself, or politely declining invitations to events you attend out of obligation rather than joy. Third, rewrite the narrative of aging. Pay attention to your self-talk about getting older. When you catch yourself thinking or saying things like, "I'm too old for that," or "My best years are behind me," pause and ask, is this really true, or is this just a story society has taught me to believe? Fourth, practice the art of beginning again. Each morning, permit yourself to start fresh. Yesterday's mistakes don't define today's possibilities. This doesn't mean ignoring consequences or avoiding responsibility. It means not allowing past errors to prevent present growth. As we near the end of our journey together today, I want to share one final teaching from the Buddha, spoken near the end of his own life: all conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with awareness. This isn't a morbid reminder of mortality, it's a beautiful invitation to engage fully with the precious, temporary gift of existence. Everything changes, including our bodies, our circumstances, and our relationships. But within that constant flow of change lies infinite possibility. Your 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond aren't consolation prizes. They're opportunities to embody wisdom that was decades in the making. They're chances to love more freely because you care less about others' opinions. They're invitations to speak more truthfully because you understand the value of authentic connection. They're opportunities to contribute more meaningfully because you've learned what truly matters. The Buddha's last words were reportedly, "Be a lamp unto yourself." After 50, this teaching becomes especially powerful. You've lived long enough to know what lights you up and what dims your spirit. You've experienced enough to trust your own wisdom. You've loved and lost enough to understand what's worth holding on to and what's worth releasing. So be that lamp, not just for yourself, but for everyone whose path you illuminate simply by being authentically, courageously, joyfully yourself. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Buddhist wisdom for life after 50. If this message has touched your heart, please subscribe to Buddha Coha, like this video, and share it with someone who needs this reminder that their best chapters may still be unwritten. Until we meet again on the path, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live with ease, and may you never forget that in every moment, regardless of your age, you have the power to begin again. Namaste.